Welcome to The Happy Writer, a show about creating and sustaining a long-term author career. My name is Patty Jansen, writer of science fiction and fantasy. I've published independently since 2011. This show covers motivation, diversification, learning new skills, and your place in your career. Come on in and be happy. In episode 73 of The Happy Writer, I'm going to be talking about the annoying phenomenon of returns on Amazon. I will be talking about potential reasons why they happen so much more often on Amazon than on other retailers, and what your attitude to them might be if you want to remain a happy writer. Of course, the inspiration for this podcast is the recent furor about returns on Amazon that started with a post by an influencer on TikTok. In case you didn't hear about this, the short video platform TikTok has a very active reader community that seems to consist primarily of a young adult audience, primarily young women, although not exclusively. Within that community are people who get millions of views on their short book videos. Some authors are very active there. I will probably talk about TikTok in a future episode, but for now it's enough to know that there is an active reader community, that they are close-knit, that they are into young adult fantasy and romance, paranormal romance, and a little smattering of the other genres. So, a little while ago, there was an influencer who had discovered that she could return books on Amazon without being penalized for it. She also discovered that you could do this at any time after purchasing the book, and that you would basically treat Amazon like a library without ever paying for any of the books. But first, I have to talk about the reality of returns on Amazon. You don't really need to be on Amazon very, very long time to notice that there is a returns column and that books appear in it every now and then. At least for me, it's every now and then, because I don't always have returns each month. It seems to be dependent on genre, dependent on your audience, and also returns seem to come in batches. When writers first find that returns appear in this column, they come to groups and forums all outraged and ranting about how is this even possible to return an ebook. And to be honest, I don't really know why platforms allow this, but it seems that their willingness to bend over backwards for customers brings out the worst in some people. You can return ebooks for a refund on Amazon, but also on all the other platforms. It is just that much more prevalent on Amazon. I will say a little bit more about why people think this is the case. So with that in mind, this TikTok influencer was talking about how easy it was to return books, and that you could just read through entire catalogues without ever paying for any of them. Since a lot of authors are also on TikTok, a big furor erupted over the appropriateness of doing this, and let there be no mistake, if this is indeed what these people are doing, and some are, I don't condone that at all. Once again, people brought out the petitions against Amazon allowing returns. Amazon has always allowed returns and has always made it super easy to return books. This has never been any different, and we see cycles similar to that TikTok furor come and go over the years. No petition is ever going to make a difference, because Amazon will always allow any purchase to be returned, and they won't ever change it. They do act on customers who clearly abuse the ability to return things, but I suspect that returning ebooks does not feature very highly on their scale of transgressions. After all, if someone buys an ebook and then returns it, it doesn't really cost Amazon anything. They have not subsidized the shipping. They don't need to employ staff to put the item back on the shelves. But people who do return a lot of things do get their accounts banned. Amazon doesn't tell us how many things you have to return before this policy is enacted, because Amazon never tells anyone anything. But Amazon suspends the accounts of people who clearly misuse it all the time. Remember that Amazon is the most scammed website in the world. Amazon also really doesn't care about ebooks. They cost them very little, they don't make that much money from them, and their return does not inflict any pain on anyone except the poor author. I really want to impress this upon you, how little Amazon cares about us. We are less than grains of dirt on the bottom of Amazon's shoes. The only decision Amazon is going to make about returns is if it starts to hurt their bottom line or if something kicks them in the public relations. So apparently after this TikTok influencer started to say that she just returned the book she read, a lot of authors professed to seeing a higher than normal percentage of returns. I don't dispute that because obviously that is these people's experiences, but I didn't experience this. This sort of stuff always happens in pockets and never across the board. So let's talk a little bit more about returns on Amazon and why they seem to be so common. As I already said, you can return books on all the platforms, and you will sometimes see returns on the other platforms, although, to be honest, I have never seen one on Apple. On Kobo, you are asked to give a reason for the return, and that reason has got to be what they call valid. I have never returned a book on Kobo, but those reasons will appear in the author's spreadsheet that you can download at the end of the month that lists all your sales. It will say something like duplicate or incompatible with device or something like that. For example, where I will sometimes see returns on these retailers is if somebody bought a box set and then accidentally buys one of the books that is already in the set. I don't think anyone would want to argue that that is not a valid reason for returning an ebook. You would want to be able to do that too. Quite often too, those readers have already told me about this on Facebook or via email. They will apologize for it. And of course I'm okay with that. If this happens on my website, I will give them a voucher for another book, often for more than the amount of their purchase. I also think that people should be able to return books where the book was found to be faulty or didn't display correctly on their device. It could be that certain parts of the book's formatting were incompatible with a device, although most platforms check this. But sometimes you get weird formatting things to show up, and I think a buyer should be able to get a refund for a book like that. People should also be able to return books that they have accidentally bought, and this is where Amazon is a little bit different from the other retailers, because buying something accidentally is really easy on Amazon. I have heard of many people who accidentally did this, either through fat fingers on a phone or a faulty mouse, or I have even heard of someone whose toddler got hold of their device and bought a whole bunch of books on Amazon by clicking on those beautiful orange buttons. Of course, those people should be able to return books. I don't think anyone would dispute that. But what if you didn't like a book? I am sure that there are people who will return books they didn't like to the physical bookshop. But being able to do this electronically makes it very easy and probably brings out the worst in some people who do this. If you talk to readers, many of them tell you that they would never dream of returning a book they read, even if they didn't like it. They might only consider doing it if the book made them very angry, was full of mistakes or formatting errors, and was not as advertised. But those cases would be vanishingly small. You wouldn't suddenly see a big burst of returns. The problem is that Amazon has made returning books so easy. The button is right there at the top, and you might be lured into thinking that using it is just part of the normal process. People who are confused might use it because they think that it looks a bit like a library, and they don't want all those books on their device. It might also be that they have a subscription to Kindle Unlimited, so they are used to returning books, and all of a sudden they have bought a book that is not in Kindle Unlimited, and they don't know what to do with it. I think it's a good philosophy in life to never assume malice where stupidity will suffice. You might call this a naive attitude, but it is one that serves the happy writer well. Yes, of course, I do believe that there are people who abuse the returns system, but I also believe that the vast majority of these returns are through accidents. Lots of people just not knowing how the system works, seeing the return button and using it. If they're not being penalized for it and not realizing what they're doing. Also, the people who normally read in Kindle Unlimited might think that you should be able to return all books. Really, the more experience you have in dealing with the general public, you will find that sections of the general public will do insanely stupid things. Believing most returns happen through accidental purchases does not wind you up so much. It does not goad you into thinking that you must do something about these freeloaders and rant about it online and write to all your readers about how bad it is and try to educate your readers and all that kind of stuff. In the first place, this sort of ranting takes a lot of mental energy, and as we have already established, Amazon doesn't give a rat's ass about us or our books, and it also fosters the everything is against me attitude, which is destructive, both to communities and to yourself and your mental health and to your friendships and your friendships with readers. You see, when you write a blog post or write in your newsletter about how evil people are returning books and reading them without paying them, the only people who are going to open your emails and are going to read them are, wait for it, your biggest fans, who are not doing any of those things and wouldn't dream of returning books. So you're just whining to them and making yourself out to be a victim to the people who also can't do anything about this, and all the while you could be talking about something more productive, like your new project. If you want, you can sign a petition, although I've already said that Amazon is very unlikely to act on it unless it costs them money. You may want to lend your voice or financial support if something really big starts happening, like one of the writers' organizations is ready to take Amazon to court over this. This is what happened with the Audible debacle, where returns were even worse. But there were some very clear points where the contract for authors was inadequate, and Amazon, who own Audible, knew that and quickly fixed the gap before any court case could eventuate. There are two things that Amazon hates. In the first place, it's a tax on the bottom line, and in the second place, it is bad publicity. Sometimes campaigns do have effect, but they have to be made about something that is able to stand up in court legally, and having a returns policy that is fairly lax does not meet that criteria. So yes, if Amazon really wanted to do something about it, they could do exactly what the other retailers are doing, which is not to make it so terribly easy to return books or ask a reason for the return. But Amazon won't do this because they have no reason for doing so. The customers like it that when their toddler has gotten hold of their iPad and bought a whole lot of items they didn't order, that they can easily return them. As long as Amazon doesn't miss out financially, they will do what their customers like. No matter how many petitions authors start, Amazon will not stop people being able to return ebooks. Returns happen on other platforms, especially these days on Google Play. From the author's perspective, it appears that returns happen in batches. You often get a flurry of returns after you've run a major promotion. If I get any returns, it's usually far less than 1% of my sales. I usually get 1 or 2 months in a year where I don't get any at all. But mostly there are a handful, and they are often on books where I've done a promotion. Sometimes Amazon will find a whole batch of them and dump them in my account all of a sudden altogether. Serial returners exist. You see people rip through your series and return them, each one by one, and this is insanely infuriating, but there is very little you can do about it. People will say that they don't look at their returns, but to be honest, I have no idea how they do that. They must also be the people who don't check their sales until the very end of the month. That's okay if that's you, but if I run a promotion or do something else, I'd like to keep tabs on how things are going. The vast majority of writers are going to see the returns and are going to feel angry when one of your series has attracted a serial returner. I just think that you should try not to waste too much energy on worrying about this, nor write rants in your newsletter to your fans. Returns are a thing that happens. For some reason, it happens a lot more in some genres than others, and it happens mostly because readers accidentally clicked the button or because they got confused. Those TikTok influencers who were advocating that people are ripping through their entire catalogues will probably have their accounts cancelled at some time. It might be soon, it might take a while, but anyway, I'm not going to waste energy worrying about these people. Instead, try to grow your audience on a platform where returns are much less prevalent and where you have a greater engagement with your readers. People who are your fans will not return your books unless they accidentally bought them twice. That Amazon will change its practices after all the campaigns is a case of wishful thinking. Amazon does sometimes change its practices after public campaigns, but it won't change this one. Being able to return books as a customer is part of the customer policy, and people like it. It's up to you not to let it get to you too much, and just spread your efforts across platforms so that your emotional exposure is not tied up with a single platform. In the next episode, I will talk about using crowdfunding and especially Kickstarter. Thank you for listening to the Happy Writer Show. Check out links and information about other episodes on my website at pattyjansen.com, where you can also find out about my books. You can support me by subscribing to the show or on Patreon at patreon.com/pattyjansen.